Hey, church. Hope you're doing great this morning. I'm going to adjust something a little bit on my camera here. And if you just wait 1 minute, there we go. It is July 22nd, and you are in the Calvary Christian Fellowship Morning Devo with Boa. We're in Zephaniah chapter 1 this morning. Starting at verse 7, it tells us to be silent. So I'm going to be silent. Be silent before the sovereign Lord. You know, that's a great devotion in and of itself, right? And be silent. I think of the couple passages right off the bat. I first think of a psalm, Psalm 46, be still and know that he is God. I also think of the book of Ecclesiastes that tells us that, hey, when you go into the house of the Lord, let your words be few. Be silent before the sovereign Lord. You know, how does God show himself in Zephaniah? It's kind of a neat, maybe, study to do. And one of the areas would be that God is a sovereign Lord. So you see that. Be silent before the sovereign Lord, like a sovereign king, right? A sovereignty of a nation, right? It's not bound or in chains to another nation. And that's the idea you get, is that God is sovereign. He is not bound by anything we do. He is on his own, sovereign. And the idea I get too is a sovereign king, sovereign Lord. So God shows himself as the sovereign king. Be silent before the sovereign Lord, for the day of the Lord is near. Now we're introduced to the day of the Lord. And this is talked about all the time in the Old Testament. And if you look up the day of the Lord, you're going to find this phrase throughout different sections of the prophets. And you'll find some really interesting ones in Zephaniah. You'll land here as well. The day of the Lord is something that we saw in the book of Revelation that took place, a time of judgment, a time of the wrath, if you will, of God that is poured upon a world that has stubbornly rejected a free gift of salvation, rejected the way of redemption, rejected the atonement that was given to the world, the nation given to the world. The world has rejected that. A free gift of salvation. Come drink of the waters freely, right at the end of the book of Revelation. What does the bride say? Come. What does the Spirit say? Come. What do those invited say? Come. Everybody's saying, come. Just come to the Lord. And bow your knee to Jesus and say yes to the atonement work of Christ for you. Be silent before the sovereign Lord, for the day of the Lord is near, this time of wrath. And whenever you see the day of the Lord, it's always prophetically spoken of as being near. It is there. The day of the Lord is something that tends to have this kind of emphasis on now. It is all of a sudden it's here. For the Lord has prepared a sacrifice. He has consecrated those he has invited. Now it's interesting that he talks about he has prepared a sacrifice and he has consecrated those he has invited, because this is a picture of God bringing a sacrifice to the altar, right? And who is the sacrifice? Well, he says, I will stretch out my hand, remember in verse 4, against who? Judah, right? Judgment will begin in the house of God first. There is a judging, a cleansing, if you will, of Judah and of Jerusalem, Mount Zion, the holy city. And so the Lord comes as a person and has prepared a sacrifice. He has consecrated those he has invited. So he's invited those to be a part of this ceremony, and he has consecrated those. Is that the enemies that are going to come in and destroy Judea? and Jerusalem? Could be, right? The Lord has prepared a sacrifice. He has consecrated those he has invited. It definitely points us to Revelation again too, of the mighty hand of judgment that is going to take place. It says, verse 8, on that day of the Lord's sacrifice, I will punish the princes and the king's sons. And it says, all those who are in foreign clothes. So you get the idea of richness here, right? On that day of the Lord's sacrifice, I will punish the princes and the king's sons, and all those clad in foreign clothes, the aristocracy and their wonderful banquets and meetings and their fellowship with all these people. Hey, good morning, everybody. Hope you guys are doing great. And it says, on that day I will punish all those who avoid stepping on the threshold, who fill the temple of their gods with violence and deceit. So some people look at this section of stepping on the threshold as kind of a superstition that took place in the ancient world, but it's something that has kind of come into our world. I heard one commentator talk about taking a bride and taking that bride into before the threshold is kind of like a ceremony that we do that maybe has some of its roots in these ideas, these superstitious ideas of the threshold being that sacred place, that place that was superstitious to a lot of people. And a lot of people are superstitious, right? They don't want to do this, don't want to do that, and I've been around a lot of professional athletes, and they tend to sometimes be like that too, very regimented. Don't want to get out of that regimen in case you kind of stepped over the threshold, right? And then hey, the game's not going to go well. And but on that day, it says God will punish those who avoid stepping on the threshold. These kind of superstitious ideas, who fill the temple of their gods with violence and deceit. On that day, declares the Lord, I will cry. The cry will go up from the fish gate. So the place of businesses will be dealt with. Wailing from the new quarter, from a loud crash from the hills. Wail, you who live in the market district. All you merchants will be wiped out. All who trade with silver will be ruined. Sounds a lot like the judgment of the harlot in the book of Revelation. If you read Revelation chapter 17, you'll see that where the harlot's judged and everybody mourns the loss, the wealth, the money, right? The people on the ships mourn her loss. At that time I will search Jerusalem with lamps and punish those who are complacent. Now I like this analogy. It's like God says, I'm going to get a flashlight out and I'm going to search Jerusalem with lamps and punish those who are complacent. You get the idea that the day of the Lord is going to be a thorough dealing of the nations and of the people and of Israel as well. And I just love that idea, right? God's got a flashlight. He's kind of looking in, and he's looking for. And what does he look for? It says in this section, not just the businessmen, not just the aristocracy and the way things are run, and we can trust God with those things. God, it says, is going to judge all those things that we don't know about. And I know a lot of times we get videos all the time of like things that are really going on, and this is really going on, and that's really going on, and it can kind of freak you out if you watch a couple of them back to back, and you're like, whoa, dude, that's crazy. But I always ask the question, okay, what can I do? And the answer is, I don't know. Nothing. I could pray. I could, sure, you could vote, but you could reach out to your neighbor. You could, but the issue always comes back to, is God, is God sovereign? Can God deal with these things? Well, the day of the Lord is God's reckoning, dealing with these things. And that's always what it's talking about. So he's going to punish, it says, the complacent. Those that are just kind of chilling out, it's just like, I don't care. oh, whatever, it doesn't really matter. That kind of attitude of, you know, complacency, indifference. You get the idea. Now, notice what it says, that he's going to get his flashlight out, search Jerusalem with lamps, and punish those who are complacent, who are like wine left in its dregs, who think the Lord will do nothing, either good nor bad. I wonder if that's a really good description of Israel today, and maybe even of Jerusalem today. Of people, if you were to interview people and say, hey, what do you think God's going to do? Da, 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 da. I wonder if people would just say, I don't know. Who knows? Or whatever he's going to do. It doesn't really matter. They really just don't have anything in their heart of like, man, that's right. The Lord is going to, come back, or they have any kind of anticipation, but they just have none, they're like wine left in the dregs, and if you know what that's talking about, it's talking about like when wine sits too long, right? Or if a wine is in a big, what it would be called, like a vat, all the sediments just hang down at the bottom, and wine gets old, and there's an acidity to it, and sometimes if you've ever had an old wine bottle with a little bit of wine in it and you smell it, it's kind of like, woo, that kind of like spoiled smell to it, and it can taste really weird. And that's what it's like. It's like a spoiling that has taken place, right? A culture that has become spoiled. It's become, complacent. Just it thinks everything's going to be fine all the time, right? And who think the Lord will do nothing, right? So people think, oh, the world's just going to keep going on. God's not going to do nothing. What's God really going to do? And who think the Lord will do nothing, either good or bad. So they don't have any really thought on it, And so I wonder today if that is kind of like how Israel is today. I've always heard that in Israel there's a lot of, most Jewish people are secular. They it's either good nor bad, And what I think is also interesting about culture today is that we live in a culture too where a lot of people don't know how to, they're so confused and maybe even so complacent that they don't know how to say something's good or bad. And they struggle with even that, is the ideas of that there is a good or there is a bad. And so we get that idea of, hey, don't, I don't want to judge you, and you don't judge me, but in judging you I'm really judging, or in saying I don't want to judge you I'm really making a judgment, but let's not talk about logic. Let's just I'm being a little facetious, but you can see that there's a lot of confusion where people, it says, the Lord will do nothing, either good nor bad. You just get that idea where people, again, like in our culture, they're trying not to offend anybody, and in doing that, they make no decisions. They're no longer coherent. Meaning, when you listen to them share or say anything, they make no sense. Because definitions don't make any sense anymore, because they don't utilize definitions. They've made up their own definitions to words. And that sounds a lot like a culture too. That's for sure, right? So, hey, there's no good, there's no bad, and I certainly, hey, have had my share of that in my day of saying things like that. Dude, you do you, I do me, it doesn't matter, that kind of thing. Subjectivity of the way we think about one another. There's no objective truth, there's just subjective truth. There's no God, there's no really, he wouldn't do good, he doesn't do bad, da 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 da. The idea of God is a distant thing, he's maybe out there somewhere, who knows, kind of deist kind of ideas, maybe God's out there, hey, who knows, but certainly he wouldn't do any good or any bad. They really don't have a pulse on who God is or what God's holiness is. And so they have no pulse on God's judgment either. And so their wealth will be plundered, their homes demolished. They will build houses but not live in them. They will plant vineyards but not drink the wine. So again, it's very James-like, right? Woe to you, rich. Remember the book of James in the New Testament, where James really launches on the rich, right? And he says, "Woe to you that are rich," and he really gives some warnings there not to be selfish, and that judgment will come upon them, and we can't trust in our riches, right? And it says, the great day of the Lord is near. So again, we read that term. The great day of the Lord is near. Near and coming quickly. Sounds very Revelation-like. Listen, the cry of the day of the Lord will be bitter. The shouting of the warriors there. The day will be a day of wrath, a day of distress and anguish, a day of trouble and ruin, a day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and blackness, a day of trumpet and battle cry against the fortified cities and against the corner towers. I will bring distress on the people, and they will walk like blind men because they have sinned against the Lord. Their blood will be poured out like dust, and their entrails like filth. Neither their silver nor their gold will be able to save them on that day of the Lord's wrath. In the fire of his jealousy, wow, the whole world will be what? Consumed. And it says he will make a sudden end of all who live on the what? On the earth. Now, hopefully you see now that these prophecies not just talk about maybe a near fulfillment of judgments of nations that are near Israel, related to Israel somewhat, that come against her, but it's also talking about the end, right? These latter times, talking about the whole earth. Psalm 97, right? The earth, or the Lord reigns, let all the earth rejoice. And then it goes into this description of God that's very much like this, right? Where when God's justice comes down, it comes down really thorough. That's for sure. And sometimes, just like Israel, they had this kind of, idea of like, oh, the day of the Lord's awesome. No matter what we're doing, the day of the Lord's going to be just so great. And man, it's going to be awesome. And they didn't realize that, man, the day of the Lord, the day of God's, his coming is a day of judgment. And it's something not to be trifled with. And that the sovereign king, when he judges thoroughly, and he judges and completes righteousness. And so it's described as just like a warrior, a warrior nation that comes against sin. And it describes it like in a bloody battle, right? With all the grotesque things that happen in battle. That's the judgment that's pictured as the judgment against sin. That it's going to be a battle, but God's going to wipe out the sin and take care of that. And the whole earth will be consumed by fire. Now, this is a theme throughout the Bible, that when the earth is finally dealt with, the people on the earth, it talks about the earth being judged no longer by water, but by fire. You even get that in the book of 2 Peter chapter 3 in the New Testament. But this is a theme that's repeated over and over. Even in Psalm 97, you see it alluded to there as well. But you see it elsewhere all over the place, in the prophets, in the Old Testament prophets. And boy, what a description of it is, right? This is probably one of the most intense descriptions of the great day of the Lord, this time of judgment. So, we read about this, and again, where does it point us to? Well, it points us to the cross. It points us that Jesus is a righteous king. He is a holy God, and every knee will bow to him. But bow now, right? Bow now before the Lord, and your sins will be forgiven, right? Come to me, all who are heavy laden, and I will give you rest, for I am gentle, Jesus says. I have come to give you rest. And, that's what this should be pointing us to, is that there always is an impending doom, an impending judgment from the judge against sin. God wouldn't be righteous if he didn't judge sin. We know that. But what does that mean for us today? It means for us to press into grace and to look at the Lord's grace on the cross and to point people to that as well, that wonderful day as well. We can also remember that God's going to judge again those people that we don't know what's going on and how they rule the world, so to speak. We always hear about those people that rule the world. We don't know them all, but we watch videos of these people, or of people who talk about these people, and they're always the mystery people that ruling the world, right? But you know what? On that day declares the Lord, right? We read that the sovereign King will judge, right? He has prepared his sacrifice. Do I believe that? The great day is near, the cry of those who reject will be bitter. Do I trust that? See, if I trust that, then I don't have to go into all the chaos of judgment of other people. I can really leave judgment into the hands of God at this point. So it helps me in my faith, too, to realize that God's the ultimate judge. And that if I live my life according to that, then I'm going to relinquish my right to judge, and I'm going to be able to realize that there is that accountability in this idea of the day of the Lord that will take place. So Israel thinks maybe that, hey, they get complacent. They think God's not going to do good or bad. He's just, whatever. And God says, nope, you can't you just sit on the sideline. You got to get in the game. And to say you're not in the game, you're in the game. You've already made the decision to sit on the bench. And the thing is Jesus calls us to get up and get in the batter's box and get ready to swing. And sometimes that's scary when you're a kid and you're in Little League and that ball's coming at you, man. Sometimes it's the scariest thing to be up at the plate. But God says, hey, you know what? By grace, man, you might even hit the ball. and you know what? It's so true. We do. We finally get in the batter's box. We finally take a swing. And then there's the potential of something really cool happening. And that is the ball actually hits the bat. And then when the ball goes out there, we start running. And all of a sudden, action takes place. But it's all about finally just coming to the Lord and saying, yes, I'm going to trust you, Jesus. I'm going to follow you into the batter's box, and I'm going to follow you to swing my bat, and I'm going to follow you around the bases. I'm going to be in the game. And for those that sit on that bench and, are complacent and don't want to get up, there's a strong word for that person, and that's for sure. Those people who look at the things of God and they just go, it don't matter. I don't care. I don't want to get in the game, And God would love to get you in the game, that's for sure. And he's done everything to get you in the game. And so, instead of thinking so earthly, we can start thinking spiritually. And, start by just thinking of the cross, thinking of the work of Christ for you, what that means, what that meant. All judgment was put on him. All the wrath of the Father was put onto his Son. All the wrath that's talked about here that we deserve, that sinners deserve, was put on Jesus. I mean, man, how does that bring this passage out? Doesn't that just boom this passage? Whoa, all this battle cry and God, intestines poured out, and I don't know what it's, entrails, woo, all this stuff like that. All this judgment, this picture of judgment against sin, right? How do we understand how radical sin is? Well, it's got to be judged like in war. There's judgment, right? There's infliction of harm, that kind of idea. There's got to be that kind of mentality, and God has that kind of mentality against sin, but he puts all that on his Son Jesus and judges him. And man, that's impactful. He did that for you and for me. And that's what gets us into the game. That's what gets us into the game with God, is that kind of forgiveness of sin. That kind of grace gets us up off that bench and into the game. So, man, I hope you get to see that these ideas in Zephaniah are really powerful. You can't detach these prophecies from the book of Revelation or the work of Jesus on the cross. It's always important to look at the cross of Christ when you're reading prophecies like this, and you're looking towards the second coming of Christ. Those two things can start shedding some really neat pictures for you. So you guys have a great day, okay? Enjoy it, and hey, we're going to get in chapter 2 tomorrow, some other cool stuff as well. So you guys take care, Lord willing, right? Always say Lord willing, because we have no clue what today's going to bring. So bless you guys. Bye.